I beg to move the amendment as on the order paper. And in fact, this may be our last meeting across this dispatch box, because the Secretary of State is once again on manoeuvres. So considering he's gunning for a promotion, let's review his record, shall we? He promised in the election that he would cut everybody's energy bills by £300. And what's he delivered? Energy bills up by £200 thanks to his plans. He said he would protect pensioners, but weeks into office, he axed the winter fuel payment, a policy that many of them have cited as their worst political decision in power. He promised that Great British Energy would lead to, and I quote, a mind-blowing reduction in bills. And yet 2 years in, it hasn't taken a penny off household bills, but it has given a six-figure salary to one of his mates. And now we learn that Great British Energy has been putting solar panels made by Chinese slave labour on British primary schools, something he promised this House he would not do. So what's next? Oh, that's right. He said he could control the price of wind. But his botched wind auction signed us up to the highest prices in a decade, way more than the cost of electricity that he inherited. Promise after broken promise. Bills up, pensioners betrayed, six-figure salaries for his mates, and eye-watering contracts for wind developers. And now, to top it all off, a so-called energy independence bill, which would shut down the North Sea. The greatest act of industrial self-harm in a generation. If that's what gets you a promotion in the Labour Party, then Lord help us all. So let's turn to this so-called energy independence bill. For true energy independence, we need our own oil and gas. But this bill enforces the willful destruction of the North Sea. We need our own petrol, diesel, I will in a moment, we need our own petrol, diesel and jet fuel, but this bill does nothing to save our refineries, which are being taxed into oblivion. We need an electricity system which keeps the lights on for British households and industry, but his plan will leave us at the mercy of foreign imports. This isn't independence. It doesn't even come close. It's an energy dependence bill that would leave us weaker, poorer, and more reliant on foreign regimes.
Grateful to her for giving way. She says that for energy independence we need our own oil and gas rather than investing in renewables. She'll know that under her government, the government paid £44 billion to subsidise our energy during the time of the Ukraine price spike. Can she tell us how much were our bills reduced as a result of having our own oil and gas when the Ukraine crisis happened?
Firstly, let me say to the honourable gentleman, bills came down £500 under me. They've gone up £200 because of the Secretary of State's plans. And let me tell him another hard truth. Cutting off production in the North Sea, he should listen to this, he might learn something. Cutting off production in the North Sea doesn't mean we use any less oil and gas. Production is not linked to consumption. All that it means is that we'll import more of that gas from abroad. That is weaker. That makes us more reliant on imports. No, he used up his chance. He should have asked a better question. Now, look, there are some parts of this work that I welcome. The Fingleton Review is impressive. I thank those involved, and as I've made clear before, we will support this work going forward. Nuclear is the only form of energy that can provide round-the-clock, totally clean power, and I'll always support policies which make it as easy as possible to build. However, there is a catch. The Secretary of State says he wants to ease nuclear regulations, whilst at the very same time he's cancelled the project that they would be used upon. By cancelling the third large-scale nuclear power station that I signed off, he has killed the nuclear pipeline. He is repeating his own mistakes. We are set to have yet another Labour government which has failed to start a singular new large-scale nuclear power plant. And now we here in Natural England are adding yet more delays to Hinkley Point C for little environmental gain. Is he fighting it? No, he's defending the status quo. But by the end of this Parliament, we'll still be waiting for a decision as to whether SMRs will go ahead. By 2030, there will be less nuclear online than there is now. And in 2035, which is 10 years away, they still won't have started any new large-scale nuclear power plants in this country. This is the same old stop-start approach that killed the industry to begin with. If that's what he calls being ambitious for nuclear, he needs to give his head a wobble.
I thank the honourable lady for giving way. In my constituency of Morecambe and Lunesdale, we have Heysham 1 and 2 power plants. The reason that nuclear power will possibly go down is because plants are coming to the end of their lives. Plants are coming to the end of their lives, and the honourable lady's government did nothing about it for 14 years. Why did she not deliver, Madam Deputy Speaker, when she was in government?
Well, look, let me tell the honourable lady. Under the last Labour government, which the Energy Secretary was part of, not a single new nuclear power plant was started. So when we came into power in 2015, when we got control of the energy brief, there was one nuclear welder left in the country. It is the stop-start approach which kills the nuclear industry. And here's the problem. They have killed the pipeline again. These are the same old mistakes. And that is why I'm raising them, because we're getting into the same trouble again. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, he says they weren't mistakes. It wasn't a mistake not to start a single new nuclear power plant. That's what he thinks, on the record. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, on to the North Sea. Andy Burnham, who is hoping to be Labour leader, talked yesterday about reindustrialisation. But meanwhile today, the Secretary of State is asking his backbenchers to vote to shut down the North Sea. This is the single greatest act of industrial self-harm we have seen in a generation. Only a complete wacko would respond to a supply shortage by shutting down their own oil and gas industry. We are in the absurd position of the Labour Chancellor thanking Canada and Norway for increasing their oil and gas production while her own government is shutting British production down. And why? So we can be more reliant on higher emission gas from Qatar or the US. So we can send billions of pounds to Norway to import gas from the very same basin that we could be drilling ourselves. And they're calling this energy independence. Have they lost their minds?
Yes.
I'll happily give way on that point.
Very grateful to the right honourable lady. She talks of absurd positions. I did a little bit of research before the speech today. I went back to the 21st of May 2024, just before the last general election. And in this House, in her capacity then as the Secretary of State, she said that she believed in net zero and that we will get there in 2050 and with the public on our side. Her position now is that she doesn't believe in net zero, doesn't believe it's desirable or achievable. Is that not absurd?
Madam Deputy Speaker, people change their minds when they look at facts. I'm not hiding for this. I'm not hiding for this.
It takes actually thinking for yourself, though.
I think the honourable gentleman needs to look at the overall record of things I said in government. The key thing, the first thing I said when I went into position is we cannot impoverish ourselves in the name of net zero.
Exactly right.
You know, I started a true costing of renewables in department because we didn't have a proper costing of energy. Who cancelled that work? The Secretary of State. I backed the North Sea. I signed off Rosebank. I legislated to protect those North Sea licences. Who is turning all of that around? The Secretary of State. And we all know the real reason that he's doing it. He's shutting down British oil and gas to show climate leadership. He put that in the King's speech. Let's be crystal clear, though. What he's saying is that he's willing to turn his back on British industry, even though we won't need any less. We'll just rely on higher emission imports from abroad. Because he cares more about the climate bureaucrats than the jobs of British workers. That is what climate leadership means to him. But the question I would ask is, where exactly is this meant to be leading us to? Bankruptcy? Where does it end? Cheering as the lights go out, as the last factory in Britain closes. That's what his North Sea and carbon tax policies are doing. They are simply offshoring British emissions. to the coal-powered refineries of India, the diesel tankers bringing us gas from the US and Qatar, to the factories we are now getting our ammonia from in Trinidad. That doesn't help the climate, and it doesn't help British workers. I'll give way to the little lady.
Thank you. I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Businesses in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton need stable and affordable energy to grow and invest. So would she agree that with our Get Britain drilling bill is vital, not just for energy security, but for our future economic security?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. The North Sea is a vital part of our industry. It not only provides us with the gas that we need for energy security, but it provides feedstock. That feeds into our chemical industry, our plastic industry. There's a whole supply chain, a whole set of other industries which rely on the North Sea and us having a successful industrial base. You lose one of those, I'll just make a bit more progress. You lose one of those foundational industries and it's like dominoes, the rest go. And this is the point. If we keep offshoring British emissions, it doesn't help the climate and it doesn't help British workers. And the question I would ask them is, do they understand how bad it looks when they make speeches patting themselves on the back here in Westminster, whilst hard-working Brits out there lose their jobs so we can import more goods with higher emissions from abroad? That's why the vote on the North Sea today should be a litmus test for them. Do they reject decarbonisation by deindustrialisation or not? Now let's talk about electricity. I'll just make a bit of progress. A key part of the Secretary of State's plan is to make us more reliant on electricity imports. He doesn't like to talk about it, but at the height of winter, when we need it most, we'll be importing twice as much electricity by 2030 as we did when they came into office. What does that mean? It means relying on the goodwill of France and Norway to keep the lights on in Britain. I'll remind the House we are now in a situation where France is on the edge of a debt crisis with the National Rally topping the polls. Does the House really think it's prudent to hand over the keys to our electricity security to Marine Le Pen? Because let's be honest, that is the Right Honourable Member's plan. Whichever way you look at it, this isn't an energy independence bill. This is an energy dependence bill that makes Britain beholden to Marine Le Pen for our electricity, to Xi Jinping for our solar panels, and to Donald Trump for our gas. Their plan is for energy scarcity, but what we need is energy abundance. That's why our plan would be to double down on nuclear, to axe the carbon tax to save British industry, to get Britain drilling and to make electricity cheap. I will happily give way to that.
I'm very grateful. She paints in her speech a very stark consequence of the Labour Party's policy of a total proscription on new oil and gas licences. What can she advise us? What will that look like without access to future oil and gas from the North Sea Basin for the United Kingdom?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman, and I know his party has changed position on this recently, and I welcome that change. Like I said before, the North Sea is a foundational industry. It's not just the oil and gas it provides. It's not just the tax revenues. It's not just the jobs that exist within that industry. It's all of those other industries it supports, the chemicals industry, the plastics industries, even the renewable industry, by the way. They support more drilling in the North Sea because they need the specialist rigs. They need the undersea technologies. They need the exact same workers. There are so many industries and wider economies that they are killing just because of the ideological bent of this Secretary of State. And here is, I will make a bit more progress, and here's the fundamental bind that the Labour Party is in. It doesn't matter who their next leader is, they will all fail. Their supposedly popular leadership contenders will become unpopular very quickly when they can't keep their promises. It happened to us in government, it's happening to Labour now, it's happening to Reform at the council level, it'll happen to whoever is in government next, unless you actually face up to the trade-offs that get you better growth. Growth is the antidote to so many of our problems, but to deliver it, you need two things: cheap, abundant energy and economic freedom. But by shutting down the North Sea, cancelling nuclear projects, keeping a distorted electricity market in place, what they are doing is making energy scarce and expensive. Now, being part of the EU doesn't solve that problem. The EU leaders themselves rail against their own energy policy. Reindustrialisation is just a meaningless slogan unless you back the North Sea, axe the carbon taxes that are killing British industry and cut the cost of energy. If none of their contenders have the courage to say anything about these issues, then nothing will change. And alongside cheap, abundant energy, the most important ingredient for growth is economic freedom. But the Labour Party openly stands for more state control, more tax and spend, more red tape on employing people, more expensive energy, less AI, fewer profits and more subsidies. But they've been on this path for 2 years now, and what do we have to show for it? Higher inflation, weaker growth, soaring unemployment. Why would anyone want more of this? Families are working harder and harder, getting less and less at the end of the month. And if what people want is full-fat socialism, why would they choose Labour when they've got the boob whisperer over there who's offering them bigger and better? Our whole system is flooded with caution. Nobody's incentivised to take any risks. That is what's making us poorer. And the truth is, the personalities in the Labour leadership race do not matter. Unless we get cheap, abundant energy, we remove the legal straitjackets, the onerous taxes, fix the broken regulators and the sluggish machine of government to set the economy free, nothing is going to change. And look, if people think on their side of the house that Andy Burnham has the answers, let me tell you. Andy is like the fun uncle who's got to sit on the sidelines saying whatever he wants without anybody holding him accountable. Let's have ice cream for dinner. Let's go to the zoo next week. Let's nationalise everything. Who cares about the bond markets? Let's rejoin the EU. He just said whatever he likes because he's never had to pick up the bill. Now he's actually looking at being in charge. He's having to go back on all of these promises. So ask him this. Ask him how he's going to fund his nationalisation plans. He wants to stick to the fiscal rules. So is he really saying he's going back to taxpayers who already face the highest tax burden in history? When he talks about reindustrialisation, ask him if he supports the Secretary of State's plans to shut down the oil and gas industry, the biggest act of industrial self-harm committed in generations. If he wants more powers at a local level, amen to that, I couldn't agree more. But ask him, how can he argue for economic freedom in one breath, whilst with another dictate to people what tumble dryers or cars they have to buy? If they really care about growth and reindustrialisation, they would axe carbon taxes, get Britain drilling, double down on nuclear and make electricity cheap. In short, they would put the national interest ahead of the Secretary of State's ideology and vote with us tonight.